The sky over the prairie rolled dark and heavy, clouds swollen with rain that had been threatening all afternoon, until at last the heavens split and the downpour came. The sodden earth drank greedily, mud sucking at the boots of any who dared cross the fields. Jacob Holt had seen storms before out here. The weather was as merciless as life itself, but today the storm felt different. Perhaps it was the weight in his chest, the loneliness gnawing at him as he glanced back at the wagon, where his daughters sat huddled together, their small faces pale beneath the canvas cover. Mary clutched the rag doll her late mother had stitched before the fever took her, and little Anna leaned into her sister's side, their wide eyes watching their father with a silent plea he could no longer ignore. They needed more than his rough hands and gruff reassurances. They needed softness, a mother's arms, someone to braid their hair in the mornings and sing them to sleep when the prairie winds howled at night. Jacob had tried to be both father and mother, but grief and hardship had worn him down, and no matter how strong he was, he could not be what they yearned for. He needed help. He needed her. Clara. Dawson sat on the edge of the porch of the ramshackle cabin she'd been calling home, her thin dress damp and clinging as she pulled the threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders. The storm had driven her out here, watching the horizon as if answers might come with the rain, though all she found was the ache of her own solitude. The town had turned its back on her months ago, whispers hissing like snakes whenever she dared step into the mercantile. She was the outcast, branded by a past she could not erase, blamed for choices that were never fully her own. Work was scarce and kindness scarcer, and though she had learned to survive alone, there were nights when the loneliness cut sharper than any knife. The storm mirrored her heart, fierce, relentless, heavy with sorrow. She did not hear Jacob's approach at first, the pounding of rain masking the creak of wagon wheels and the steady crunch of boots through mud. But when he stepped into view, tall and broad-shouldered, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, she lifted her eyes and stilled as though fate itself had appeared before her. Jacob paused at the foot of the porch, his gaze steady, his jaw set with the kind of resolve forged through years of loss and endurance. His coat clung wet against him, the leather darkened by the storm, but he did not seem to notice. For a long moment neither spoke, the air between them thick with unspoken questions, until Jacob slowly removed his hat and knelt in the mud, heedless of how it seeped into his trousers. Clara's breath caught, startled by the suddenness of his gesture, and she instinctively drew back, but he only held her gaze, his weathered hand extending toward hers. His voice, when it came, was low and rough, as though scraped raw by the wind and dust of the plains. "Clara," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer long withheld. "I ain't a man of fancy words, but I'll speak plain. My girls, they need a mother. And you need shelter, safety, maybe even a chance to start over. I can give you that if you'll take my hand." The rain fell harder, drumming against the wooden porch roof, streaking down Clara's face until she could not tell if the wetness on her cheeks was from the storm or from her own tears. Her fingers trembled as his calloused palm brushed against hers, the warmth of him a stark contrast to the chill sinking into her bones. She searched his eyes, those steady, storm-weathered eyes that spoke of both strength and weariness, of promises not easily made and never easily broken. The weight of his words pressed against her chest. Marriage. Proposal not born of love's fire, but of necessity, of two lives battered by hardship that just might find refuge in one another. She wanted to speak, to tell him she was no good for his girls, that she had nothing to offer but a tarnished name and a heart fractured by rejection. Yet as she glanced past him, toward the wagon where two small faces peered out with such silent hope, her resolve faltered. Those children were lost without her, and maybe, just maybe, she was lost without them too. Her lips parted, but the words tangled in her throat, torn between fear and yearning. She had dreamed once, long ago, of a proposal filled with roses and laughter, of a man pledging undying love beneath a golden sunset. Life had robbed her of such illusions. Here was a man kneeling in the mud, rain soaking his shoulders, offering not romance but survival, not promises of wealth or beauty, but of shelter and belonging. And perhaps in its own rugged way, that was more real than any dream she'd ever held. Her chest rose and fell, breath hitching as she whispered, barely audible above the storm, "Why me?" Jacob's fingers tightened around hers, not harshly, but with the steadiness of a man who had made up his mind. "Because you're strong," he said simply. Because you've been cast aside same as me, and I reckon you know what it is to fight when the world's against you. My girls, they don't need perfection. They need someone who'll care for 'em, who won't run. And I've watched you. Clara, I know you got that in you. His eyes softened then, the hardness in his features melting into something raw, something almost vulnerable. And truth is, I don't much fancy the thought of facing the years ahead alone neither. The silence that followed was broken, only by the rain and the muffled sound of the girls shifting in the wagon. Clara felt her resolve crumbling, the walls she had built around her heart weakening under the weight of his words. For the first time in months, someone was not asking her to leave, not branding her with shame, but offering her a place, a role, a family. Her hand shook as she lifted it fully into his, her voice trembling, as she gave the answer that would change all their lives. Yes, she breathed, almost as if the word might vanish in the rain. Then stronger, with a steadiness she did not know she possessed, she said again, yes, Jacob, I'll be your wife.